and I'm most delighted to welcome you to the webinar and to tell you about working families. Hopefully you all know us. We are the UK's national charity for working parents and working carers, and our mission is to remove the barriers that working parents and carers face in the workplace. We do this in 3 key ways. The first thing we do is we have a free legal advice line to empower working parents to understand and use their workplace rights. Always important to know that the people contacting us want to keep their jobs. This is all about how do they make those human-to-human conversations with their line managers in order to get what they need to balance their lives. Then we support employers, and hopefully many of you are on here, to improve your flexible and family-friendly workplace practices. And then the last thing we do is we drive legislative change. And last year we had a really big win with the right to request flexible working from day one. So this National Work-Life Week, we did a poll and we did some research, and we asked parents who weren't working flexibly what was stopping them. 1/3 said it was because flexible working wasn't possible in their role. That's fully 1/3. We know from working with progressive and innovative employers, 3 of whom we have on our panel today, that with the right mindset and approach, some form of flex is possible in every single role. And it's more than important than ever that we highlight the many ways of working flexibly so no one is left behind in reaping the benefits flex can bring. So our brilliant panelists know about that, and they're going to bring their reflections, their insights, and their expertise to share with you today. I'm delighted to introduce them. We have Syndie Simon, who's the Inclusion and Diversity Manager for Grant Thornton UK LLP. And they were the winner of the 2024 Working Families Best Practice Award for Best All-Round Flexibility. Well done, Syndie. Then we also have Squadron Leader Jenny Munro, who works in employment policy at the RAF, the winner of the 2024 Working Families Best Practice Award for Best for Mothers. Again, congratulations, Jenny. Great to have you here with us. And finally, but not least importantly, we have Hannah Fender, who's the HR advisor at Southdown. And Southdown has been in our prestigious list of top employers for working families every year since 2011. So absolutely brilliant to have you here. We've asked our panelists to have a think about some questions that we prepared earlier on. And we're going to do this one question at a time. They'll have 3 or 4 minutes to answer per question. We've already had a conversation about asking them to keep to time. And that's really so that we'll have some Q&A time at the end. So the first question is, how do you manage providing different types of flexible working options in the various and diverse teams and job roles in your organisation? How do you ensure the availability of flexible working is fair across the workplace? So I'm going to start with Hannah. Hannah.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So firstly, in designing different flexible working options at Southdown, we consider the 3 needs. So firstly, the individual's need, having a good understanding of the individual's circumstances and what they're hoping to achieve. Secondly, the organisational need, so consider any impacts on the role, and of course consider the benefits to the organisation and on the individual. And also we look at the job role itself, so what is realistic based on the type of job. We do have services at Southdown operating and providing 24/7 care and support, and also out of hours mental health services to individuals in crisis. So for us, it's about recognising that what may work in one area might not work in other areas of Southdown, and that one size doesn't necessarily fit all for flexible working, both for the individual and the role. So looking at some of those practical flexible working options that we have in place, we have many informal approaches that are often just managed locally between individuals and their line managers. So some of those informal approaches that we have for more office-based roles, for example, we have hybrid working. So a rough guide is that 40% of the time is spent in the office. However, that is really flexible and that's really just a guide. We have flexi time, so we will have the management of our own diaries. And generally the culture is that as long as the work is done, there's no expectation as to when that work is done. But also alongside that, there's no expectation to respond out of hours if you aren't working flexibly. And also we have meeting free and early finish Friday, which is great. And meeting free just means it's a time for people to catch up on things perhaps during the week. So some of those more formal approaches that we have for our office-based staff include things like formal change of hours, part-time working. So I think 45% of our workforce are part-time. We have compressed hours, so lots of people working 9-day fortnight or 4 days a week, and term time only contracts. And we also have many people operating on job shares as well. Now, how we manage that in some of our out-of-hours services and 24/7 services is that we have different options in place. So some of those include informal options like shift swaps, toil, and in our rotated services, all of our staff are provided their rota in advance, and it's discussed with the team so that preferences can be taken into account. And often people choose to have static days on their rota, so they work certain days each week, and that's set within the rota. And we also have a number of staff who choose to work weekends as well. That might just work better with their childcare arrangements or caring responsibilities. And we also do have 0 hours options as well for staff. So we are aware, obviously, of the new government commitment to looking at exploitative 0 hours contracts, and we absolutely fully support and welcome that. We do have a pool of bank workers who actually choose to be on a bank contract and not commit to contracted hours, and that is entirely at their request. And then if at any time they wish to pick up a permanent contract, then we offer that straight away. So ensuring we provide fair flexible working options across Southdown. So again, for us, it's just recognising that one size doesn't necessarily fit all, both for the organisation and the individual, and that not every role can be flexed in the same way, but it's about what we can do. And we also, for us, it's not just about the legal requirement to consider flexible working. It's more about for us having that meaningful dialogue with individuals to achieve a balance of their needs and to hopefully offer a compromise where we can. And just looking at those initial 3 needs and finding solutions. And I think as an organisation, we really recognise as well that individual needs do change over time. So, for example, children starting school or caring for older parents. And as an organisation, we just really encourage that open communication to look at what we can achieve to ensure people can achieve that work-life balance.
Jenny, thank you Hannah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was probably a textbook response in terms of all of the amazing things that you're doing. One of the very good reasons why you've been in our top 10 employers for since 2011. Thank you very much for that. Syndie, I'm going to come to you next. And again, this is about how do you manage providing different types of flexible working options in the various and diverse teams and job roles across your organisation.
Great, thanks so much, Jane. So yes, I mean, there's possibly some overlap with Hannah. So my organisation, Thornton, we're a professional services firm. So, you know, people working at laptops from home, from offices, from client site, and a variety of different teams within that, you know, with different client needs or maybe not being client facing. So we do have a huge group of people. And one of the things that we have in place is our how we work policy. So this means people are given autonomy to work in a way that works for them, because, you know, as Hannah said, you know, everyone is different. And I guess the key premise of this policy is that each individual is trusted to meet the requirements of their role in a way that works for them. And it means that all our people also have access to flexible working from day one in policy, but it's more about how that works for you and the business, and that you will get the work done and work around that. So an example of this, for example, is meetings. You know, people can have meetings at different times, people can have appointments during the workday, and that's completely acceptable to have that in your diary, as long as you're still getting your work done and you're respecting other people's time. So, you know, maybe don't arrange a appointment that could be arranged any other time of day at a point that you have a meeting with 5 senior stakeholders in the business and expect them to move it. However, if you've already got time blocked in your diary because you have a doctor's appointment, for example, and or childcare pickups, or whatever it is, that can be worked around and that's respected. And I'll come on a little bit more in terms of the how we work culturally and how we embed this stuff culturally later, but I think that's a really key thing we do. If someone wants a more formalized arrangement, so for example, part-time working, job shares, which we really want to do more of, or a 9-day fortnight, for example, that can be agreed as a formal agreement between that person's people manager and our people services, so our sort of HR function, just to kind of make sure that person is supported in that arrangement. But we encourage all of these types of arrangements in our job ads. So for example, in our job ads we'll state, flexible working and job shares. People are encouraged to apply with that basis. For any role that we advertise, we're open to having those discussions. And just in terms of the diversity of our teams, one thing that we've done, which I think has been great for all of our people, is we've introduced flexible bank holidays, and this was several years ago now. And essentially this is really helpful in terms of people will have their bank holidays booked into their annual leave calendar, but they can essentially choose to rearrange that day. So for example, at Easter this year, I had a really busy time, and I personally didn't need to have those bank holidays on the Friday and the Monday. So I effectively just moved them and cancelled them, and I just had 2 extra days of annual leave to take at another time. So I took them in May when I had a holiday with my friends. And people can use that for all sorts of things, be that family arrangements, religious reasons, just culturally, if people celebrate different things at different times. And I think that's really helpful when you come onto the diversity side of things, when you're talking about flexible working in a diverse team, because although we're on a working families webinar, it's not always about working families. It's about lots of different people with different needs.
Brilliant, Syndie, thank you so much. And now on to Jennifer. So Jenny, if you could talk to us about how you manage different types of flexible working options.
Yeah, hi. So it's a tricky one for us, because we have to manage our flexibility across the organisation, but we're also a deployable force. So giving access to people across the RAF is tricky on the whole. But what we try and do, and the MOD have tried where they can, is to look at different flexible working options and make them as accessible as possible to as many people. This includes kind of flexible service, which is kind of a dialed back version, which allows kind of 1 or 2 days off a week, flexibility, less commitment, less money, but would give that bit more of that work-life balance. But then what we try and do as well, we're trying to allow people the option, flexibility within their normal working day. That could mean starting just a little bit later in the morning, finishing a little bit later in the afternoon, and then making up that time elsewhere. We look at compressed hours, and we offer kind of enhanced leave, which is the option for what a service person might not have the ability to, is have that flexibility in their job due to shift patterns. But what they may be able to do is kind of give back kind of 30 days of their leave, and then they get back 50 days. They can take a chunk of leave after they've done a certain amount of service, about 15 years service. They can often access that enhanced leave. The main aim from our side is to educate. Flexible working is kind of relatively new, really. It's been around in our books for a while, but into the implementation and use of it is fairly new, and offer the flexibility. So not so much the line managers, but also the individuals to come forward and say, actually, I just need a little bit of balance, a little bit of flex, just to manage kind of commitments, deployments, the demands of the job. And it's kind of that education piece with what we're trying to promote. I guess since COVID, like many other organisations, it's been proven that there are some jobs in the military, mine is one of those, where I can do elements of it at home. So, certain jobs and departments have been afforded that extra flexibility. And I guess for those individuals who can't have that working from home option, it's then seeing where we can offer them and flex. It might not be in their working week, it might be in chunks, like I've just said, but just promoting that information. Also, what we're trying to do, obviously the MOD have their set flexible working options that we have available across the 3 services. The RAF are leading at the moment with a full flexible working review across all 3 services. And what we're doing is we need to see, is our options that we're offering people still fit for purpose, while also balancing the needs of the organisation and the deployable force that we need to maintain. So it's a tricky balance, but we are trying to review things regularly, educate people, and increase what we can the option of flexible working.
Thank you very much, Jenny. What I've been really struck by with all 3 of you is that there is a threefold focus. One is the individual, the second is the role, and the third is the organisation. And it's having all 3 of those in mind all the time. So Hannah, back to you. And I'm really interested to understand the answer to this question, because I feel like you didn't have any. But how have you had to overcome barriers? And if you have had to overcome barriers, how have you done that in implementing and embedding these different types of flexible working? How did you address it?
Yeah, so I think we've certainly had to overcome barriers. And I think one of those significant barriers has been feedback from our managers around the impact that having more part-time staff can have on their time and capacity. Obviously, it's extra appraisals, extra supervision sessions, and everything that comes along with managing individuals. So I think for us, how we've overcome that is by having a really good level of understanding with our managers. And we've been offering training and coaching, particularly on the benefits of flexible working on the workforce, and that actually it's win-win for the individual and for the organisation in terms of the positive outputs in terms of engagement and productivity when flexible working is in place. I think another barrier for us has been managing expectations across different sites and addressing concerns. So obviously, as I said in the first question, we have a number of different roles that have very different outputs, and it's how we manage people's expectations of what we can achieve and that balance. And for us, it's been about having that open dialogue, adult conversations about the role and what is required, and that understanding that fair might not mean the same across the board. But again, it's about what can we do? How can we offer a compromise? What can we put in place to support you? And this is all under the umbrella of our Southdown Beacon, which is a psychologically informed approach to working with people alongside our values as well. And I think another barrier for us has been around the nature of our work and being not-for-profit. We have a number of contracts for mental health services and learning disability care, and those contracts are through local authority. So often the money isn't available for a suite of policies that might be quite costly. So I think how we address that is through our culture and how we are with people, and ensuring that we consider their needs and offer that work-life balance and, a work-life that supports family-friendly working, because I think that's equally as important to our staff. And I think, again, a number of our roles, we are operating in partnership with other organisations such as NHS Foundation Trusts, and we are providing a service that we are contracted to operate. So our partners might have expectations as to how they wish for contracts to be delivered. So, for example, some of our mental health support staff are co-located within GP practices. And although there are staff and our employees, the GP practice will have a view as to how they would like the contract to operate. And, for example, how much time might be spent face-to-face with clients against how many appointments could perhaps be done on the phone or on remote calls. And I think, again, it's just by having those open conversations with both our staff and our partners. And our contract managers work really hard alongside our partners to manage our contracts and ensure that we're delivering, but also sort of educating and explaining from an HR and people perspective about our role as an employer and the importance for us to operate flexible working.
Super. Thanks so much, Hannah. I love that mention of line manager training. And the different expectations and having those human-to-human conversations. Syndie, over to you next. What are the barriers that you've experienced, and how have you managed to overcome them?
Yeah, thank you, Jane. So I think I touched on this a little bit in my first answer, but I think what's really important is embedding some of this stuff culturally. So it's all very well having a how we work policy and flexible bank holidays and saying you can apply for a job share, but that only really works if it's culturally acceptable to work in that way. So to kind of understand what barriers you're facing, you need to understand what they are in the first place. For example, using data, employee surveys, focus groups. So that's what we did. And then one of the things that came out of that was, this cultural acceptance and feeling that, maybe it wasn't acceptable by the senior people. So how we addressed that was we rolled out gender allyship workshops. We initially rolled them out to all our partners. We're trying to roll them out further in the business now. So what that did was we had all of our partners sort of come together in sessions and groups. They had essentially breakout groups as part of that, and obviously within that you have female partners too that were sharing some of their experiences, as well as us sort of sharing some of the data and information and feedback we'd had from the people within our business, specifically our women that were facing these barriers to progression. So I think when we sort of covered this, helping them understand their role in being visible role models and that what they can do to make this more culturally acceptable was really key. So for instance, having them share stories about how they're working flexibly and it becoming not just a gender issue. So for example, having them put in their diaries when they're going to the gym or where they're doing school pickups or doctor's appointment, and having those very open calendar entries, having those senior partners do that really sort of set the tone that other people in the business felt comfortable doing it. So because if you have, a senior male tax partner putting his school pickups in his diary or, putting in his gym sessions in the calendar, when you have a female manager that's trying to, for example, manage childcare or even just her own life, it helps her feel that actually she can do that too. And yeah, I think ultimately it also links to other things in the business. Again, for example, around mental health. So with well-being being really key in this area, having these sort of open diary entries, it allows people to kind of focus on their well-being too. So for example, putting in therapy appointments or, going for a daily walk and sort of, again, embedding that within the business. So kind of balancing our strategic priorities and moving it away from gender issues, as I say, really, really helped with that side of things. Yeah, I think I'll pause on that for a moment and hand back to you, Jane.
Thank you, Syndie. I think that whole issue around culture and gender is absolutely fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the comments that we've heard from senior male managers to other more junior male staff can often be, well, can't your wife do that? So I love that idea of gender allyship. So Jenny, over to you now in terms of what are the barriers that you've overcome?
So I guess kind of as I mentioned before, for us, our barriers really sit within education, the education of not just the line management, but also the individuals knowing they can come forward and request some flexibility in their day. I think that for us is what we're trying to work through. So we're working quite hard to remove some of those barriers. Our team, particularly, we manage the casework. So if anybody's got any questions, then they would come to us and request some advice on flexible working, whether that's directly from the line manager, from the individuals. We don't tend to have any issues in terms of people rejecting. It's just getting the requests from people. So just as an example, the way people should be recording flexible working for us is on our central IT system. Our figures are really low, but we know a lot of people are taking some form of flexible working, whether that's informal or formally. The issue with that is we can't then look and review our policies until people put more of that data online. So what we've tried to do now is we've created a survey. There was a survey done back in 2022. We're going to do it. We've sent another one off, which will hopefully get released in the next couple of weeks to try and gather a bit more of that information. We sent out kind of email informations directly to line managers, but also to the individuals, hopefully trying to, remove some of those issues and concerns about flexibility. And I guess a bit like, in the last kind of discussion. Culturally, you know, it's not something that when people think of the military, flexibility and working flexibly is not something that comes to mind. So again, it's just changing those mindsets to know that actually we can offer flex, we can offer some opportunities, not always. And also line managers shouldn't be afraid if they can't do that within their department, but that just to get them to think, well, I can't offer this, but what else can we offer? And I think that for us is a really important way to look at flexibility, you know, and get away from the model that flexible working can only be done through working from home, because actually there's, you know, that's something that does limit us. It's not something that we need to focus on within our organisation, and we can offer elements and quite a lot of good work-life balance. So that for us is one of our main barriers, I think. Kind of, yeah, culturally, we have got a parenting cell now as well, which is fairly new. Who we work alongside. You know, I speak with the team monthly to kind of bring in some data, things that people don't necessarily bring to my team, that they talk about with on the stations. And that's been really, really invaluable to see where people are needing a little bit of flexibility, a bit more work-life balance. And that's been really, really key for us as an organisation outside of our departments.
Brilliant, Jenny. Thank you so much. The last question for everybody is, how do you promote flexible working across all levels of your organisation? And again, Hannah, I'm going to come to you first.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think as part of our at Southdown, as part of our evolving culture, and recognition that more flexible working options are good for Southdown, in terms of attracting, retaining talented individuals. At the heart of that is our proactive EDI strategy called This Is Us, and flexible working is also threaded through our business strategy as well. We do have a range of obviously HR policies that support and promote flexible working. However, it is our belief that our policies are not just there to protect and undertake our statutory requirement, but to shape our proactive approach in supporting people. I mentioned earlier training of managers, and we do have a suite of management development training to coach them on the range of flexible working options and educate on the sort of benefit of flexible working on the individual and the organisation. And again, it's not just there to meet a legal requirement, but to encourage those open conversations. We do also have a Southdown Voice, which is our method for feedback directly from staff, and that is a meeting that is held between the C-suite and senior management and staff representatives, where they could feedback issues or concerns, and sometimes flexible working is raised through those channels as well. We do also have Parents and Carers Network, offering support and peer support, and a range of flexible working topics are often discussed at those meetings. We also have a Menopause Network and Neuro Voices as well. And also we have a staff intranet where we have regular articles on staff stories, sort of reaffirming our commitment to flexible working across Southdown. Of course, we're a very proud member of Working Families and have been for a number of years now. And that really helps us talk about flexible working and keep up to date with ideas and updates. Webinars like this are just great to hear what other organisations are doing. And it's an opportunity to, of course, benchmark ourselves and ensure that we're promoting flexible working as best we possibly can as an organisation. Also through our job adverts as well, we include flexible working on many of our job adverts, and just always want to be open to that discussion. And I think it's also about leading by example. So within our C-suite and senior management, for example, our people and experience, our chief of people and experience has firsthand knowledge of the importance of flexible working. So within a previous role in retail at one of the leading UK supermarkets, she was actually the first member of staff to request flexible working and part-time working as a branch manager. So she really has got that first-hand experience, which is just fed across the organisation in terms of the importance of offering flexible working. And we've also recently been accredited Investors in People Gold Award, which we're really proud of. And again, it's just acknowledgement of that direct feedback from staff and engagement from our colleagues about how people feel working at Southdown. And we are also undertaking a piece of work around role profiles. So that is developing some quite lengthy current job descriptions that we have across Southdown, and putting them into really output focused summaries of a role, and some of the KPIs within there is really helping us to sort of base our decisions around flexible working, and that it's about what are the outputs of the role rather than, and can that be achieved, how can that be achieved, rather than just, you know, presenteeism, for example.
Super. Thank you so much, Hannah. They're just fascinating nuggets coming up in all of these answers. And I can see that we've got some really good questions. So it'll be lovely to come back to you and just kind of dive a little bit more into some of the detail. So over to you now, Donna. I'm going absolutely mad. Over to you now, Syndie. It's that thought of yoga at the end of the week that has completely turned my head. How do you promote flexible working at Grant Thornton? Syndie?
Thank you. So, you know, I mentioned some of the initiatives we have, you know, policy thing. Oh, hello. Yes, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, fantastic, great. Sorry, my computer just lagged a little there. Yeah, so I've already mentioned, you know, some of the things that we have in terms of initiatives, policies, etc. Again, it's kind of really about embedding this culturally as how we promote it. So one of the ways that we do that is through story sharing. So, you know, I've mentioned the importance of partners being open about their own flexible working arrangements or encouraging open diaries. So sharing stories of that, and sharing stories of different types of flexible working functioning effectively is also really important, because that helps people within the business see, oh, this can work in this type of role. Great, if it can work for them, maybe we can be more open to it working within our department. So for example, we're trying to promote job shares at the moment. That's something we're really keen to do more of in our organization. And, you know, we advertise these in our job ads, you know, open to job shares. But what we found really useful is we shared a story on our intranet of a job share that's actually working effectively. 2 people in the business that have been in the role for X number of months, where it's working really successfully, and you have both of them talking about it, someone from their team maybe talking about how they were a little bit hesitant at first about the idea, but actually it's proved so much better than hiring someone on a part-time basis, for example. And that story is really powerful in creating that change culturally within the business. I think there's also a level of trust. We try and build a culture where trust is given as a starting point, rather than having to be earned. So as there would be in any relationship, yes, trust can be broken. And if it's broken, it has to be rebuilt. And, you know, there's always a level where, you know, any underperformance must be managed. However, it shouldn't have to be earned in the first instance. It should be given, and our people should be trusted to work in a way that works for them. And that's really important to us as an organization too. I think also we try and, again, coming back to the story sharing, have people share stories about flexible working and parental leave as well, outside of those sorts of typical working mum stories. So we share those as well. We do a lot around kind of sharing where that's working, but we also think it's important to normalize other family structures, and also in the more typical family structures, the sharing of domestic duties, because again, helping to kind of make all of our people see the importance of this and get on board with this just helps to make it better for working families. So for example, we recently had a senior tax partner. Him and his husband have just had a child by surrogacy, and he's taking surrogacy leave, which is basically the equivalent of maternity leave in terms of length of time. And he shared his story talking about that, and talking about how he was making that work as a senior tax partner in the business. And we also did that sort of side by side with another story of one of our women who's on maternity leave, having her daughter, but she's had a daughter with her wife. So again, you know, her wife is taking paternity leave, but she doesn't have that sort of husband working a full-time job, and sort of showing how this works in their families. So maybe we can make it work in other typical ones too. And then one final thing is we enhanced our parental leave last year. So we offer, I think it's up to 6 weeks of enhanced paternity leave. So it's a bit more than the statutory requirement. And as we embedded that in our business, when people started to take that, again, we had a senior male partner taking that full 6 weeks of paternity leave, and having him share his story about how it was really important to support his wife and those sort of early months of the birth of their child. So yeah, I think just to summarize, it's about, you know, sharing the stories and encouraging people to be open and be really visible role models through that in our business.
Super. Syndie, thank you so much. I love those stories of different families. Absolutely brilliant. And finally, Jenny, you did touch on this briefly in your last answer, but how do you promote flexible working within the RAF?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, we are working hard and working harder to educate, as many people as possible on our flexible working opportunities. We also the RAF also sit on a tri-service leave working group, which looks after the all of our leave, flexible working, and everything that's included. So what we tend to do is we'll go out to, through the parenting cell, out to units and go, is there any, what changes you're looking to make? Take in their ideas and make some changes to our policies. So policies, and then getting that advertised out. We also did a few months ago, we collected a load of case studies. So what we wanted to show is a breadth of different people and how they're using flexibility within their working week, working days. From the mum who wanted to drop her child off at school every morning and making up that time of the day, kind of as far out as somebody who's working out in Brunei because her husband's serving, so he's remotely working out there with him for the RAF. So we've got about 10 or 11 different case studies which are going to get rolled out over the next few months, and they're just going to go into people's inboxes and just to kind of say, hey, this is somebody, anonymous within a various different departments, to just demonstrate what we can offer. If because some people might not want to go to our policy documents. Our policy documents are quite, they're quite big, they're quite detailed, when sometimes all you need is a little snapshot and go, do you know what, that would really help me out right now. Even if it's just a short period of time within my my working day, that would just something that would really help us out. We also, obviously, we sit quite a lot, different members of our team on the flexible working, on the working families calls, around tables, and a few conversations from other people, the stakeholders that, have been at those round tables, we've then taken back and said, actually, do you know, so-and-so is using this within their policies. It's something we can look at. And as we've had a few changes to our policies as a result, and then trying to get that out on the streets, we've had slight changes such as carers leave added onto our, into our policies as well. So it's mainly education, getting stuff out within our media teams, creating websites, and access to documents is going to be our next step. We've still got a long way to go, but just little snippets, little bits of information and a bit more education, and allow people that access to the right teams is key for us.
Many thanks, Jenny. That's great. It's absolutely fascinating to hear, from my perspective, how far the RAF have come, and yet how you've identified all of the different things that you also want to introduce. And that somebody in the audience has said that case study approach is something that they really love. I've been struck by a couple of things before we go to questions. Again, that mix of the role, the person, the organization, and how do you make all of that work? And that sense that actually, if you as an individual are working at your best, your contribution to the organization is going to be even better. That sense that people are individuals, I really liked that. I loved, and Hannah, I think it was you who raised this, that idea that fair does not necessarily mean equal. And I think that's bringing that back to the idea that within the press, certainly, there's a lot of focus on working from home. And of course, not working from home is not the only flexibility. And there are certain roles where working from home is simply not possible. The examples I always use are a brain surgeon and a cleaner. Both of those roles you've got to be in a place to be able to deliver those. Conversations about culture, really, really interesting. And then again, Hannah, your review of the role profiles, and Syndie, the focus on different types of families, and also that flexible working isn't there to support only families, it's there to support everybody. So yes, thank you so much for all of that. I think there are some absolutely fascinating things in here. So, questions. And this kind of comes back to the culture issue. How do you manage tensions where different roles allow different degrees of flexibility and different types of flexibility? Hannah, can I come to you first?
Yeah, of course. So I think, yeah, that is a tricky one. And I think, as I mentioned in some of my answers for us, we do have such a wide range of roles, and it is just about that acknowledgement that not every role will come with the same flexible working options. And I think that often, there is a personal accountability there, that if you apply for a role as a support worker, that doesn't work from home. It just doesn't fit. But I think it's just about that adult conversation of, okay, well, what are you hoping to achieve? What are your circumstances, and how can we support you with this? What can we do to help support you in your role and achieve what it is that you're looking for? So I think for us it is about, yeah, just acknowledging that fare might not be the same across the board, and I think often our staff are aware of that. I think there is a good level of understanding through our culture that the role still needs to be undertaken and completed. But again, it's, well, what can we do and how can we support you?
Super, thank you. And Jenny, within the RAF, do you get a sense that there is a sense of unfairness? Is there tension?
We haven't seen of cases come to us specifically looking at tensions, but we are aware there will be disparities across different departments, because again, like an aircraft engineer can't do that from home. However, that's we have had a case study where one of the juniors from within an engineering department just came to us and said, well, actually, can we move our shift pattern slightly? So for one idea actually changed the whole shift pattern for a department, to allow them a bit more flexibility and a bit more work-life balance, which was, so the message is getting out there. It's just doing it differently, I think.
Fabulous, thank you. And Syndie, within Grant Thornton, have there been challenges in terms of tensions between different departments, different roles?
Yeah, I mean, I think you actually probably tend to see it more within a department than between different departments, because I think people understand, that different roles have different requirements. I think sometimes where maybe you get that tension is people in junior roles being a little bit frustrated if they don't have perhaps as much flexibility as someone in a more senior role that can manage their time better. So I think it's really about being clear on the expectations, where flex is available as well it isn't, and then the why behind that. So if you have someone that's in a junior role, they might need to be in an office a few days a week or on a client site due to the nature of their role. Maybe they need to manually see some invoices and tick those off at a client site, or maybe they need to be around their colleagues because they're still training on the job, and that's how they're going to be able to more effectively learn. And I think once you're really clear on those expectations, I think, and people understand the why, and also where they do have flex, they can still work from home a couple of days a week, and let's work out what day works best for you. I think that really helps to manage that.
Thank you. When we did the poll right at the beginning, one of the responses was that for some people, it was the fact that they were site-based that was really challenging. And that is also allied to another question from an attendee who's saying that flexible working is only allowed in some exceptional circumstances within their organisation. How would you start having those conversations? What would be the first conversations that you would have about how to move an organisation to a more flexible way of working? And Syndie, if I can stick with you for this one first.
Yeah, I think ultimately, if you have the ability to do so, data can be really powerful, and just kind of understanding where this is causing problems within your organizations and then taking that to leadership is kind of where you can start. Sometimes you need to present people with cold, hard facts. Benchmarking, such as Working Families benchmarks and other ones out there for different types of inclusion diversity strands, can also be really helpful in saying, look, this is where we're at, this is where we're doing compared to other organizations, we need to address this. Recently we've actually conducted some research focused on sort of what we call mid-career women, where we looked at the experiences of about 600 women, and we found about a quarter of respondents felt that flexible working wasn't promoted by their employers, and 31% of respondents actually then experienced that as being where they did have flexible working, that as being detrimental to their career progression. So obviously, if this is really clearly negatively impacting women at a certain level, that's something that needs to be addressed. And I think using that data, especially any data you have within your organization, especially if you can look at it from an intersectional basis as well, you know, maybe you can tie it up with ethnicity or socioeconomic background to understand those nuances too. And then, you know, presenting something that your leadership can't really ignore is really powerful. You're on mute, Jane.
Thank you very much. It's always got to be one, and quite often it is me. Jenny, in terms of the RAF, were there challenges in overcoming that idea that actually some roles there's no flexibility, therefore we're just not going to do it?
I imagine there probably was in the past, and there may still be, you know, in some departments now. Hopefully, though, we are now more accessible, as in, you know, the employment policy team and the parenting team. We've got different teams that are established who can, you know, pick up the queries either from the individuals or the line managers directly to help and educate them. But I imagine, like any organisation, there will be some, you know, line managers or people thinking, well, I can't do that because of the job I do. So there's obviously no flex in the system for me. I guess what we would then do is try and reach out to them and say, well, is there anything you can offer? Is there anything, you know, within your area that would allow someone just a little? And often that's all they need. They don't really want the full flexibility. They just need a little change just to give them a little bit of work-life balance. And yeah, hopefully we can help them with that. Not in all cases, but in most.
Thank you, Jenny. And Hannah, I'm going to come to you last, because it seems to me that Southdown are really quite far along on their journey. Do you still find pockets of people saying, well, this job just can't be done in this way?
I think it has happened in the past, and I think how we have approached that with those areas of the organisation is sort of mainly around a level of education and coaching managers on the benefits of offering flex, and that actually it's really important for retaining our staff. And if someone is just asking for a small adjustment to the way they do things, why can't we try and support with that in order to retain our staff? And often it is just around talking to managers around the impacts of, well, you know, if someone leaves because we aren't able to hopefully, you know, meet what they need, then there's an impact there for the manager as well. So I think for us it's around, yeah, training and educating our managers. I think what Syndie mentioned around data has been really key for us as well. So those outputs and are people achieving what is expected of them in their role. And also for us, I think we've used staff surveys as well in the past to understand, you know, what our staff are feeling around flexible working and where can we improve. And I think that can be a really good source for taking it perhaps to senior management in other organisations, or, you know, to say, well, this is how our staff are feeling. How can we improve here?
And do you find, Hannah, that you get lots of buy-in from your senior managers?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is pretty well culturally embedded here that of the importance of flexible working. And I think that is, you know, right across from senior management, C-suite, you know, down through the organisation. Yeah, I think that's absolutely sort of their message that this is what we want to promote and achieve within Southdown.
Thank you. And Syndie, coming to you now, you've given us such great examples of senior managers, partners within Grant Thornton who are living flexibility in their day jobs. How important do you think that has been in terms of the culture change within Grant Thornton?
I think hugely, to be honest. I think without that, I don't think it would work. You need to see people doing it to believe it. You need those visible role models to look up and say, oh, that person's doing it, I can make that work too. And be able to even just be open to ask the question yourself, do you mind if I work in this way? Yeah, without those senior role models, I don't think it's possible to embed some of this stuff culturally. But having said that, it doesn't have to be every single senior manager in the organization. Yeah. You just need enough to just sort of start to tip the balance. And maybe it's one really prominent individual that's, you know, the most senior person. You know, maybe it's the CEO coming out and saying, I'm doing this, who's with me? You know, it doesn't need to be a full organization shift overnight, because that's not how change works. Culture change, unfortunately, takes a really, really long time. It's about those sort of gradual getting those key movers to be open themselves, and that everything then gradually starts to shift.
Thank you. And finally, Jenny, what's been the experience in terms of the RAF with those really senior leaders?
So the senior leaders, they are supportive of a change within the organisation, but again, it's a tricky balance, isn't it? Because obviously they need to look at the strategic deployability of our organisation alongside the needs of the individuals. So it's a really hard balance for them to strike, absolutely. But they supportive, absolutely. How we are then managing it's just trying to work out where we can manage it. I think that's probably the best way, without trying to speak on their behalf. I think that's probably where we're needing to focus our energies on this, I guess.
Thank you. And one quick final question for all of you, in literally just a couple of words. Are you investing in training line managers to support flexible working in all its forms? Jen, sorry,
go to
Syndie,
Jenny first.
I can start with you because I'm with you already.
Yes, I think is the answer. We're looking at our people managers as a whole, and where we have existing resources, how we can amplify that specifically to people managers. We have a people manager hub where we just it's open to everyone, but it's where we have reactive resources, business as usual resources, and proactive resources. We also have a newsletter that goes out to our people managers once a month, and we use that to flag specific stuff. We want our people to see whether it's supporting people during a particularly difficult time, or flagging updated parental policies, flexible working, things like that.
Super, thank you. Jenny, how about you?
Yeah, so we're trying to get onto so we have what's called promotion courses across the RAFs. What we're trying to do is provide the training at those promotion courses through the parenting team for the non-commissioned members of the staff initially, but we are trying to find an in for the commissioned staff as well. So we are trying to find, and I know one member of our team as well, he also briefs a lot of we have career managers who manages those people's their next steps, their jobs, and they are definitely educated on what's available to them, and that will go through to the line managers. In terms of direct line management training, we're not doing that at the moment, but we're trying to filter it through the different areas first.
Thank you. And finally, Hannah.
Yes, certainly. So as I've mentioned, we do have a suite of training for our managers that certainly includes flexible working and flexible working options. And I think for us, really, the focus recently has been not just around our statutory requirements, but actually educating our managers on what might work in their teams, and just sort of broadening their thinking, I think, around how our services can be delivered with people working flexibly. And I think, within our people services team, we're really supporting and guiding managers through this process, and sort of coaching them through on individual cases as well as to how things might work.
Super. Thank you, Hannah. Wow. I think that was absolutely extraordinary. The range and the breadth of the ways in which organizations are embedding flexible working in all of its forms, and not just getting fixated on working from home, I think is extraordinary. Looking at the RAF, of course, which is such a different organisation, looking at Southdown, which of course is a public sector organisation or not-for-profit, and then looking at Grant Thornton, the different ways in which you have adapted your models to be able to manage different forms of flex is just extraordinary. I guess my final reflection is the real focus that you all have on this is the business, this is what we need to deliver, but how are we going to do that in the best way? And there's ideas of trying little things. What kind of flex is required? How could we accommodate that? Looking to see what's possible, as opposed to stopping people and going, oh, well, we can't do that here. And then, of course, that idea that culture is king, and that getting that buy-in from everyone within the organization is just really, really important. Although, as panelists have said, it doesn't mean that you can't get some flexibility in an organization, even if you do have resistance from all kinds of people within the organization. So for those of you out there who are struggling with this, small steps is what I think we would all recommend. Let's start somewhere and see where we can evolve to. So thank you very much indeed, everybody, for joining us today. We will be sending the webinar recording to all of you. Do share it with colleagues. For HR and D&I professionals in our audience, do remember that we offer employer membership. I'm delighted to say that all of our panelists have at some point mentioned our benchmarking, our rewards, and our employer membership. So thank you all. Your fivers are in the post. So absolutely delighted. Do see our follow-up email for that. And then again, a number of panelists mentioned this, the idea that in every role description that you are in every role that you are advertising, you have some conversation about flexibility. Certainly, we would encourage everybody to use our Happy to Talk Flexible Working logo. It flags to people that as an organization, you are at least willing to have that conversation. So again, really, really important. And even the government's Flexible Working Task Force is endorsing that Happy to Talk Flexible Working logo. So I really would encourage you to use that. So final thank you to Syndie, to Hannah, to Jenny, and of course to the Working Families team who put this together. Thank you very much, and happy National Work-Life Week. Hope to see you all here on Thursday. Thanks very much, everybody. Goodbye.